If my calculations are correct, when this podcast hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to hear some serious shit.
And hey, what's going on? We're back now with another episode of the Digital Drive-In Podcast. My name is Alex. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Garrett.
Hi!
And we watched another little film today, didn't we? Down at the drive-in.
It's the Libyans!
What film did we watch, Garrett?
We watched Back to the Future.
Wow! And what's it about?
It's about going back to the future.
Wow.
It's a movie that wouldn't fly today. It's about finding out what your parents were like in high school.
Yeah. Not that anybody's ever interested in that nowadays.
Oh, I meant the fact that, like, your mom having the hots for you was kind of...
Oh, that's true. But, I mean, that could fly in some of the places down there.
Right.
My mom still has the hots for me now. And, of course, this is the 1985 science fiction film produced by Steven Spielberg and directed by Robert Zemeckis. It was written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, and it stars Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. And what do you think of Back to the Future, Garrett? What's your history with the film?
I saw it relatively soon after it came out. I don't think I saw it at the theater, although I could have. I mean, I would have been 6 years old.
Right.
I do remember it being the talk of school.
Right.
So I either saw it at like a second run theater, like a cheap theater, or I saw it as soon as it came out on VHS, because I do have very fond memories of loving this film as a kid.
Right, yes. Same here, except obviously not back then, but it was, I had it on DVD and then on Blu-ray, and pretty sure I ran them out. Much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which we did a couple of weeks ago, this is one of those movies that I would say sort of shaped my love for film. And it was very instrumental. It was one of the few movies that I did watch over and over and over and over and over again as a kid. Yeah, I like it a little bit. And if you listen to any of our other stuff, any of our other appearances on maybe Films from the Basement, I think it was, at one point we had talked about our favorite films of all time. And if you're familiar with us at all, of course, you'll know this is the one that I picked for my all-time favorite film of all time. If you can pick one of those.
Right.
This is the closest thing I've got. It's a movie that I put on to watch this podcast, and I watched all of it. I didn't do anything else during it. I just sat down and watched it all. Actually, I did one thing during it, and that was go make food because I was hungry. But I paused the movie feeling like 10 minutes had gone by, and when I paused it, it said 50 minutes had gone by. So it's it moves so well, and it's so incredibly fun. But at the same time, it's also excellent in every regard. It's very, very interesting, don't you think?
I would completely agree. I think this was one of the early movies that taught me to look in the background for details.
Yes, I totally agree. For me, it was this and Hot Fuzz were the two movies that taught me that kind of stuff, and details matter in a film. And that was at a time when, young Alex liked the goddamn Transformers movies. So he was excited and saw the second and third ones in theaters, and it was like cheering. Hindsight's 2020, is it not?
Well, you don't know until you have more experience and you're figuring out your taste.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think we'll dive right on into this one, because what better place to start than the very beginning?
Mm-hmm.
And the very introductory scene with the opening credits. Or hell, even before the opening credits. Where the big text slides onto the screen. It just says Back to the Future. Then it fades out, and we open with a bunch of clocks ticking in one very, very interesting and awesome long shot. What do you think of that long shot?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe the very first time you see it, you don't even, like, your brain doesn't necessarily pick up that it's a continuous shot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the setup and everything for that had to have been, they had to have done quite a bit of planning.
Yes.
But it's actually amazing how much of a story that introduction tells you without having to, like, have a character necessarily tell you, even though there is a little bit of voiceover. I mean, not voiceover, but like the background TV telling you background stuff. But it's like a very natural way of putting you into the world explaining the things that are happening in it and already setting up the characters of Doc and Marty.
Exactly. It really does a good job right off the bat of like setting up maybe the last couple of weeks in Doc Brown's life and him getting to the point of creating the DeLorean and testing it out. You know, we see the news clip footages of the Brown family house destroyed and such, so we get a little bit of his background, and then of course the missing plutonium is highlighted sort of on the TV.
Mm-hmm. As well as his skateboard hitting the box.
Yes, exactly. And that's how we sort of end the long take. Now this whole sort of tracking shot is actually broken up, I think, somewhere in the middle. So it might be two different takes of it. But when the disgusting food pours on into the cup, I think it cuts down to show it fall in, but then it cuts back up and then it's still in the tracking shot. But still, it's very, very interesting. And of course, right off the bat, we're introduced to our protagonist, Marty McFly, one of the probably most iconic, I think, protagonists, maybe in cinema. But is that just me and my clouded vision?
I would say, especially for like, young, I mean, he's not a young kid, but a kid because he's still in school.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play up the fact of his age, which typically these types of movies, it would be that sort of a like coming of age, growing into a thing. And they kind of already have him established as kind of like a cool guy that doesn't conform to the norm and kind of just does his own thing. And
Well,
I
he's a
like
high
that
school...
as a...
Sorry, you go.
I was just like, I like that as a kid because then I felt like everyone kind of treats, I mean, other than like the principal, but it's like the other people that at least like Marty kind of treat him as an adult or as an equal.
Yes. But not only that, it's sort of like a high school... He's a high school kid, and we get a lot of shots in the high school, but it's never really like used as a crutch kind of thing, like you were saying. It never holds him back. I mean, we get a couple lines here and there where it's like, I got tests and stuff, but it's never like he's never sitting in class bored out of his mind or anything. We don't have to sit through all of that. He's a high school kid, but like you said, you know, the world around him and the people around him don't treat him like a high school kid, but neither does the movie.
Did you ever read the novelization of this?
I did not.
It's very interesting because there is a ton of that as set up for the movie, and they cut all of it. And I thought it was great. The way that he knows Doc Brown is they're making illegal bootleg tapes and selling them.
Oh, really?
Like VHS
Actually,
tapes.
I did know that. That was one of the... I believe one of the early drafts of the film had that as like one of the starting scenes where he would be making the bootleg tapes and such to set up that relationship. But we don't we don't get a relationship or explanation in the completed film.
Right.
We just get that he hangs out around them.
Which I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of like, it allows you to fill in the blanks on some things. It doesn't feel the need to explain everything to you.
Exactly. He's honestly, it looks like just an impressionable kid that, you know, found a role model who's doing cool things and he wants to help out. Or maybe an outcast. Maybe Marty kind of feels like an outcast, so he connects with Doc.
It's almost like you don't even like second guess. Like, why are the two of these guys hanging out together? You know, it's like that doesn't even really come into your mind. You're just like, okay, yeah, Doc and Marty are going out and going to have an adventure together.
Yeah, but well, I think that too. That's on the actors. Because Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox have such incredible chemistry.
Yes.
As our two leads. Like, incredible chemistry. To the point where, and we'll get to this a little later, I couldn't see anybody else in either roles. And, you know, I don't want to talk about it right now, but it is a segment I kind of want to get to where there were a lot of people in contention for both these roles and even a different person cast as Marty. And I can't see anybody else but these two characters, or these two actors playing these two characters. They fit in so well and so perfectly, and it's like, much like when we talked about Raiders, it's iconic. That's all you can say. Now, Marty's late for class, and we get immediately... He's a slacker, but we get immediately thrust into Huey Lewis and the News.
Yes.
And one of the greatest songs to come out of a movie ever, The Power of Love.
I mean, the soundtrack is great.
Well, the soundtrack's phenomenal. But what do you think of sort of that? I love that opening scene, or I guess, yeah, it is sort of the opening scene of how you're telling me it's 8:25 oh, I'm late for class. And then the song starts and he runs out and he's like holding the backs of trucks and skateboarding to school and all that. But it sets up the world and we get a look at the clock tower and we get a look at all of Hill Valley kind of. It's another really interesting way to set things up, but also progress the story along. You know, Marty passes by the yoga place and waves to all the girls in it. And of course, later on, that's the diner.
Right.
And it's a bitchin' soundtrack, like you were saying.
I mean, to me, other than Ferris Bueller, I think Marty McFly is like the coolest high school kid ever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ferris Bueller's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll have to be another episode of the Digital Drive-In at some point.
Oh, and in the intro too, I forgot one of the clocks has a guy hanging from the clock, which will come into view later as well.
Lots of little fun foreshadowy stuff and all that. There's a really interesting line too. It's the screenplay is really clever. You know, it's a well-told story and all that, and then we'll get to that too. But there's a lot of really clever lines at the beginning, especially of stuff like, yeah, well, history's gonna change. Get it?
I mean, didn't Dan Harmon say this was like the perfect script?
I believe he did, and I would be inclined to agree. And if you, well, Dan Harmon, if listeners out there recognize his name, he was the creator of Community and the co-creator of Rick and Morty, which is currently a show airing on Adult Swim that borrows quite heavily from this film.
You don't
because
say.
It started as a parody on, I forget if it was YouTube or like Newgrounds or something, but it was The Adventures of Doc and Marty, and it was spelled all wrong and funny, and it was really profane, but it was a Back to the Future spoof. And then Doc became Rick and Marty became Morty, and it worked its way and developed itself into what people regard as one of the best animated shows on the air right now. So it's a very influential film. What do you think of the Battle of the Bands audition scene, where where Huey Lewis is the judge?
Yeah, it's like the band stuff is fun, and then like the name of the band is the Pinheads.
Yeah,
we're the Pinheads. It's if you've ever been in a band in high school, it's like it perfectly encapsulates like that in just a few seconds. So it's really cool that like they had that in there, and then like you said that. Oh, Huey Lewis is going, I'm afraid you guys are just too darn loud.
Yeah. And again, they're playing Power of Love too. It's great.
Yeah, so, but it's funny too because it also sets up Marty as like having talent and ability, but one of the things holding him back is him fearing rejection.
Right.
You know, which is a really sly way of setting that up, but it doesn't just affect Marty. And that's the really cool thing about these. They're all like intertwined storylines too.
It's almost like every character has that fear for the most part. Doc's afraid of another failure. George is obviously afraid of rejection from Lorraine. I suppose Lorraine is afraid of rejection from Marty. And Biff's just an ass.
I mean, and not just rejection from Lorraine, but also rejection of his stories that he writes in his book, and that's why he doesn't share them with anyone.
Right. Very true.
And then Lorraine kind of, even though she acts differently towards her children in modern day, back in the past, it seems like she's throwing herself at anyone that's not Biff. It's like that's the only one that she clearly says no to. You know, it's like it seems like she really wants a relationship really bad. So it's like she wants to be accepted.
Yeah.
When Marty kind of says like, geez, you smoke too and everything, she's like, nah, you're starting to sound like my mom. You know, she wants to be one of the cool ones. So that might be why she wants to hang out with Marty so bad. Is, you know, maybe she feels like she's underappreciated, or she feels like it's all the characters are very human. And that's what makes them interesting. And they aren't all perfect. They're not Mary Sue's. They have flaws and they make mistakes. And that's one of the really cool things about it is like, even though that stuff happens, it still is a happy, fun movie that could be surrounded by a lot of dark things.
And another really interesting, now going to Lorraine and how you talk about how she talks to her kids at the beginning. Our timeline that we're in at the start of the film is shit. Marty's life is horrible. You know, his brother's like almost a bum. His dad is a loser. His mom is drinking vodka by the cups, and it's just not a good life for him, right? He dreams of the 4x4, but he can never have it, and the car gets crashed. So his only lifeline to like something more and something great and something he wants has been taken away from him. And it's a really interesting then to look at the end of the film and how much that changes, seemingly just by, Marty in the past. And this film is really, the time travel in it is, I think, a highly debated topic, more so in number 2. But what do you think of sort of the time travel elements to this film? Do you think, are they logical? Do they work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works as I mean, there are only so many things you can do scientifically accurate on something that has been so far shown to be impossible. Um,
Yes.
but as far as like memories and like reflection on your own life, like if I would have changed one thing or made a different decision, how would my life have turned out?
Hmm.
And I think everyone, that's just a human thing, we've all done that. And it's like to be able to do, hey, I wonder what my parents were like when they were kids. If I hung out with them, would they be cool? Would they be nerdy? Would they be stupid? Would I get along with them? Would they get along with me? And then how would my life turn out differently if I would have made different decisions? Gets to kind of be, looked at and thought about in this film. And so I think that's why it touches a lot of people, because it has all of those truths in it, even if scientifically or logically maybe some of the stuff could be questionable. It you don't even think about that because all the other things work so well. But I think it also works logically too.
Now, something we had talked about really quickly, the soundtrack, and I mean the soundtrack is different than the score,
Right.
but I want to take a little look at the original score in this film by Alan Silvestri. It is fantastic.
Yes.
It is an incredible score. Obviously, the overture and the main theme is very triumphant and big and bold, and that's what um, Zemeckis wanted from it. He wanted it to sound big. When he was telling Silvestri the score, he didn't want it to have, or he wanted the film to sound big through the music, but
Mhm.
he also knew that he didn't have any big sweeping cinematography shots or anything for Silvestri to work with, like say something like in a western. But he still wanted it to have that big triumphant sound. And a lot of the original score is just accenting on the action. So especially when things happen, you'll get like the dun, and when Marty's when the Libyans come in, I don't know how they found us. I don't know how they found me, but they found me. Or when he's, of course, in the last scene, or in the finale, when it's the race against time and all that, and Doc is hitting a roadblock at every step, right? Tries to
Mhm.
plug it in and he can't reach it. The score is always there to just smack it and accent and build intensity just with slight notes. And as much as the melody is beautiful, and like I said, that overture is very sweeping. I think that the not the quieter moments, but the more subtle moments, and not the big triumphant soundtrack pieces, I suppose. Even though they are great, I like the little things too, and I think that's what you need in an original score. You can't just have a great theme and then the rest of it be trash. I think as a whole, this music is just fantastic.
Yeah. I would agree. To me, it's up there with like Empire Strikes Back and
Yes.
Superman and the Indiana Jones themes, and it's as soon as you start to hear it, you recognize where it's from. And like you said, it's more than just the main theme. There are so many of these little touches that either make you fearful or excited or the clock is ticking. I mean, it's like some the fanfare at the end when Marty's trying to get the pole attached to the car and you have like that
Hmm.
really bright brass sound and then you have the really good snare drums going. It's like all of that. It's just I really like all of those touches and it fits and I can't imagine it without those.
Yeah, exactly. And it adds, right?
Yes.
Good music should add to it, and it's almost, if you put any other song in there, it would change the tone drastically. And I think that Silvestri's score fits the tone of each beat of this film perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, I got a fun little story actually with the score. So back in high school, I was in the band, and for those of you who don't know, don't listen to me from other places, I'm up in Canada. I won't disclose where, other than that. But we traveled down to Orlando Studios for like our year-end trip or whatever, we played. We have a marching band, so we played music. Sort of, we marched through Orlando Studios, which is cool because we got to go backstage where all the actual old sound stages are. But at Orlando Studios is the Hard Rock Cafe, and I guess another personal thing is I have a peanut allergy, a deathly one. So me being an idiot, I forget my life-saving EpiPen in the hotel room, right? So I have to get it, otherwise I'll die, except it was in the pouring rain. So I had to run all the way back to the hotel, which is about a 5-minute run, in the pouring rain to get my life-saving device in case something went wrong. And they play music there because it's Orlando Studios, Orlando Universal Studios, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the song playing and all throughout my 5-minute run back to the hotel? The Back to the Future theme.
Exactly.
And it was wet, but it was awesome. and I'm sprinting full tilt and I'm not in shape, and it's da, 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 as I'm sprinting through the rain, and I don't have any cash on me, so I can't even like take a bike taxi that they have there. And I'm full tilt sprinting, and it's Florida rain, so when I get back I'm drenched, but I'm still alive. And that's my little personal story for the day.
Nice. I'm glad you're still alive.
Oh, thank you. I'm not.
Oh, I'm gonna eat a whole bunch of peanuts. What do you think about the poster?
The poster, it is absolutely, well, iconic. I'm going to be saying that a lot, I guess. But it's like, it's great. It's perfect for what the movie is. Have you seen any of the original posters, like some of the other ones?
Like some of the ones they didn't use? Or
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like at first they kind of made the car kind of like not real clear what it was because they weren't exactly sure. I mean, I know in the original script they had talked about having it as the refrigerator.
Yeah, but
which is where we get it from.
They didn't want kids climbing in the refrigerator.
Yeah. So then Spielberg's like, I don't care about kids. We'll put it in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Hey, but at least kids know to climb in refrigerators if there's an atomic bomb.
Right. So they're going to die anyway.
Solid.
Right.
Might as well die of asbestos or suffocate. Is it asbestos in a refrigerator?
I wouldn't think so, but
no, it's something else. It's some other poisonous gas.
Asbestos isn't a gas.
Well, then it's some kind of
poisonous material.
Yeah, like moving on.
They're like lead lined or something, maybe.
Moving on from this.
Lead poisoning.
Oh,
Rick.
Oh, geez. I don't know, Rick.
You do that way too well.
Thank you. But some of the old posters were all obviously they focused on Marty more than anything, which they should, but there's one of him climbing out of a stopwatch. There's one of a watch. He's like wearing a wristwatch, and like the next numbers are going up, so the watch says 11:38, and in one direction is like 11:39, 11:40, 11:41 flying away, and in the other way is all the numbers descending. But another one is just 3 pairs of shoes. So it's Lorraine and George's, but in the middle is Marty's, all like high school kids. So there are a lot of really interesting things, and a lot of really interesting different fonts for the title. And they're all terrible. All of the fonts are terrible, especially in comparison to the excellent, and I'll say the word again, kind of iconic logo this film has, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we do get nice little taglines. So stuff like 17-year-old Marty McFly got home early last night. 30 years early. Or like, Marty McFly has just come between the most unlikely couple in high school. His parents.
I like he's having the time of his life. The only question is, what time is it?
Yeah, that's a great one. Or Marty McFly took a spin in a new sports car last night, but he never got it past 55. 1955.
That almost seems fake.
No, it's on this poster.
Oh, that's crazy.
Maybe we'll throw some of them in the post down below.
Marty McFly just broke the time barrier. He's only got 1 week to get it fixed.
He's broken the time barrier, busted his parents' first date, and maybe botched his chances of ever being born.
Dun, dun, dun.
But then there's my favorite, which is and it actually wasn't in any of the posters in that book that I was looking, so I have to pull it out my ass here. Hold on. Ah, he was never in time for his dinner. He was never in time for his classes. Then one day, he wasn't in his time at all. That
That's
one's
a good
pretty
one.
good too.
Yeah.
They're all pretty good. That's the one on the main poster. And I like how each of the sequels posters too just added another character. It was the same poster, but it was like
Standing
another
behind
one.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great. Or in the third one, of course, they're wearing all the cowboy gear too.
Well, yeah, and then like the second one, he has the hoverboard.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm gonna botch his name though. Did Strutsan draw that poster?
I'm not sure. It does seem like his kind of
It
art.
definitely seems like his kind of art. And if you don't know who we're talking about, he's the guy that did all the hand drawing posters for movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark and all the Star Wars films as well. And he has a very unique, very realistic art style, and it certainly looks like it. I'll have to look into that after.
I mean, it would make sense since Spielberg was producing.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned it a little earlier, but we talked about how this film has a perfect screenplay a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
At least
Yeah.
I think it does.
I agree.
It moves so well, and it's so tight, and there's so much foreshadowing and but also little, like I said earlier, clever jokes and gags, but also things in the background, like you were saying. I mean, I've honestly never seen, unless I'm just blind, the man hanging from the clock, like in the clocks at the beginning. I'm probably just blind or just didn't think about it, but there's obviously Peabody's farm and the Twin Pine Mall changing to Lone Pine Mall later on in the film because Marty knocks it down with the DeLorean when he travels back in time. Pretty interesting though. Is there anything you wanted to say about the screenplay at all? Any?
I mean, it's like there's that Chekhov's gun, right? Where if you bring up a gun like on the mantelpiece, you have to bring it back into the third act.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost like the textbook version of that, where everything that is brought up at some point during the background or what something a character says or does comes up at another point in the movie.
Yeah. And especially I find in the first like 20-30 minutes before they go back in time, there's a lot of those one lines, Uncle Joey didn't make parole again and all that, even if they're just setting up jokes, not necessarily plot points. There's so much set up at the beginning.
Right. Yeah, like Lorraine saying, I can't believe a girl is calling you.
Yeah.
To Marty. And then later you find out that, she's all over boys. And, the episode with Jackie Gleason.
Yeah.
Comes back later. And
rerun.
Yeah.
What's a rerun? Right.
His dad having the inability to say no to things.
Yeah.
Which, like some of the stuff is explained how it got that way or why the person is that way. And some of it is like new revelations that Marty didn't know about his dad. He didn't know his dad was into science fiction and writing stuff. And then he like uses that to get him to do what he wants.
Mm-hmm. So, Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan.
Yeah. I mean, which is cool because then it kind of shows like Marty is aware of nerdy things, but he's not really a nerd.
Yeah.
So it's like he gets kind of that stuff wrong. So it's like it's not a plot hole or anything, it's a character error or whatever or he's just like throwing stuff in that he kind of knows about that he thinks his dad would understand or would find interesting, or that's how he get on his side. And I just think that that's cool. And then again, a lot of times we'll complain about movies taking place during a certain time period, and like this wouldn't happen or this hadn't been invented yet. But it's like Marty introducing those things before they had been invented, and it being in a time period before it actually happened is cool.
Your kids are gonna love it.
Yeah.
I guess we talked a lot about these characters we're just naming by name, but maybe we should talk about just how fantastic they are. Each character. It's kind of similar to like Raiders when we talked about that. How none of the characters in the film are wasted.
Mm-hmm.
There's no weak parts to it. Even Biff's gang, I would say, is very important to building Biff's character and building his like intimidation factor. He has these goons behind him, and even though they don't have any lines or not a lot of lines, you really get this sense that you cross Biff, he's gonna mess you up.
Well, and they have personality too, because like the one guy has like 3D glasses.
Yeah.
which is hilarious. And then the
Yeah.
other guy is he's an actor. I mean, of course, duh, he's in the movie. I'm trying to remember what's his name. He was in Twin Peaks.
um,
He was the Phantom.
oh, jeez.
Why can I not remember his name?
Well, there's Billy Zane. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. I
So
forgot
Billy
Billy
Zane.
Zane was in Twin Peaks until right now. It's season 2 stuff, so I repressed it.
Right. So it's interesting, that he has a very specific look, but it also is like a classic of that time period look.
Mm-hmm.
It's like no one really sticks out. It's like even like the guy at the cafeteria, like
Yeah.
he has his own personality,
Yeah.
and he doesn't just deliver his lines,
You're gonna
monotone.
buy something, kitty. You're gonna get out.
Yeah, it's not like, yeah, we have coffee, and
Yeah.
that's just how he say. It's just like, I can't give you a tab unless you order something. He's like, okay, well, give me a Pepsi free. You have to, have to pay for it. Well, just give me something without sugar. You know. And it's funny that there's like these lines of a character that's on screen for just a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and when he tells Goldie to clean up the place and start by sweeping,
Yeah. I'm gonna
it's
clean up
really
this
funny.
town. It's great. It
Yeah,
really
and
is.
and like there's little commentary that doesn't like rub your face and stuff, but it's there. Like in the 30 years, not one thing has changed about politicians and about the things that they say to people to get them elected. And it's the exact same.
The same
He
car,
promises. Yeah,
the
I mean
same
it's a
music
different.
playing
It's
almost.
yeah, it's like the same music and the exact same statement that they're saying what it is that they're going to
Yeah.
do, and it has like the same voiceover. And it's like that. What a great touch.
Yeah.
And it's like they're not just that there are details, or it's not just that it either subverts or reaches your expectations, but they're all smart little things that's touched on once and then it's moved on. And if you notice it, great. And if you don't notice it, it doesn't take away from the
Yeah,
story by not
exactly.
noticing.
Doesn't confuse you or anything.
Right. But it rewards you for paying attention or for watching it again or for looking at the background and having an attention to detail. And I love movies that reward you for watching them.
And I think these characters all go hand in hand with their actors too.
Yes.
And each actor is just perfect in their role, really. I know we talked earlier, well, Christopher Lloyd, um I want to find a synonym for iconic. Do you know one off the top of your head?
No, not off the top of my
Awesome.
head.
But like Doc Brown is such a great character, with the crazy hair and especially like the lab coat and the white outfit and the remote control for the car. That sort of whole look to him, or at the end where he has like the chrome glasses and the yellow coat. It's just
It
fantastic. And obviously Rick and Morty, he looks very much like a live action Rick.
it's like Bob Gale and Zemeckis understand archetypes and found people to fit what your expectation of a crazy scientist would be, what your
Yeah.
expectation of a teenager in the 80s would be, what your expectation of parents in the 50s that were young would be. And it
Hmm.
hits all of those expectations so that a note doesn't sound off. It's like a really good catchy song that no matter when you listen to it, you always nod your head to it and you sing along to it.
Like the power of love.
Yes.
It's very, you know, film is great nowadays, but they really don't make anything quite like this anymore.
No. That is one thing. It was definitely a thing of the 80s, I think,
Hmm.
of having like these perfect entertaining films that were fun and actiony and romance. It was like every single thing you could possibly throw into a film, they threw into it and it worked at every single level and the pacing was great and it's memorable.
And it's almost an adventure film too,
Yes.
which obviously when we talked about Raise the Lost Ark as well was something that I said I love adventure films and I wish there was more of them. But this, isn't that globe trotting kind of adventure, but it is a time trotting adventure.
Right.
So
It's
it's
an adventure of a character.
yeah, exactly. And with Doc Brown, do you want to hear some of the interesting finalists? I don't know. Do you know any of the interesting finalists that they had for
Uh
Doc Brown?
I don't remember. It's like at one point I went through and watched like every single thing that was on the disc and read stuff, but I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
remember it offhand now.
Well,
So go for it.
give me your thoughts on each one as I bring them to you, because obviously, like we said, Chris Lloyd is this so memorable and perfect in the role. You can't see anybody else in them, let alone someone like Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum is weird enough.
Yeah, but I don't think he's eccentric. And
It's
well,
not the
maybe he
same.
is, but not loud enough. You know?
It's sort of like I think one of the perfect movies that he's in that he's not like necessarily the main guy is Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
But you need that Sam Neill next to him that's
Yes.
almost like clashing against him a little bit, like two adults. And I don't know how if he would have either he would have overshadowed Marty or Marty would have overshadowed him.
It
And
wouldn't have been two together,
at the
right? They wouldn't have
same
had that
level,
chemistry.
yeah. Because it's almost like no matter what Christopher Lloyd does as Dr. Brown, you always like him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like even when he's like ignoring Marty and like saying like "Good night, future boy" and doing all this other stuff, it's like you still like ha ha ha, this is fun.
Yeah.
You know, you never have any fear that
It's almost
suddenly.
like Jeff Goldblum would come across too dickish at times too.
Well, and wasn't a movie that he did right around this time, The Fly? I think he would scare the pants off of people.
Yeah, yeah. What about
I think there's like
John
that
Cleese?
darkness. John Cleese, it's that would be too comedic. I don't think I could take him
Yeah.
serious in it.
No, not at all. And I mean, it's Rat Race. It came out years later, but I just be picturing that.
Yeah.
I'm eccentric. What about Harold Ramis? I feel like he could do a good job, but it would just be him doing Egon again.
Right. And also his comedy is very dry.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that Lloyd does is his physical comedy, and I can't really see
Yes.
Ramis doing like his eyes and expressions.
What
Just
about
the way yeah,
when the trash can catches fire?
yeah, and the Great Scott and
Yeah.
it can't be done, it can't. And this I love it when he goes, "A bolt of lightning." And then Marty goes, "What?" And then he says it,
1.21 gigawatts.
but he literally says a bolt of lightning the exact same tonally that he had already done.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a bolt of lightning. What? A bolt of lightning. You know, like he's either explaining it to you or slowing it down. He literally, as like a robot, repeated it exactly how he just said it. And that comedic timing and not being dry, I can't see Harold Ramis doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's really good at comedy, but it's almost like Chevy Chase would be a completely different kind of comedian.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though he's really funny, he's a completely different type of comedy. And I think you had to have someone like Lloyd to do it that way.
A few other people also in consideration. So those ones were all finalists before they decided on Lloyd. But other people that were in consideration included John Candy, which I think would have been interesting. But again, a little too comedic, right?
Uh-huh.
But it still would have been good. I think that would have been all right.
I think I would be okay with John Candy. I've never thought about him as being Doc, but kind of, I mean, like in Spaceballs, he's real jovial and he laughs.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of see that, and you haven't mentioned it or anything, but like if Rick Moranis, I know they would both be short, but I think he would have.
Rick Moranis as Marty.
No, Rick Moranis as Doc.
I guess John Candy as Doc and Rick Moranis as Marty.
Okay, I would pay to see that. I would pay to see that if they could digitally manipulate that now to have Rick Moranis as Marty. I would go.
Rick Moranis as Doc, though, then it would have been too sheepish.
Right.
I think that, and then Marty definitely would have overshadowed him. Because
Well,
we're talking about how cool Marty is, but like.
I was just thinking, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He does really good as like a weird scientist coming up with
that's true. Yeah.
Wacky things.
So I was just thinking his Ghostbusters character.
Right. Well,
that
Strange Brew. What if you had him and Dave Thomas?
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna go back in time, eh?
Hey, why don't you go grab us another beer before we go on the road there?
They could be feeding Einstein beer, and on the dog in the dog bowl, and then when Marty like opens up the gull wing door, all these bottles pour out.
Yeah.
Oh, you just have to move some of those over. I kind of live out of the car.
How are we supposed to go back in time when there's so many bottles in here, eh?
You're gonna
Just
paint
push 'em
Einstein
over.
up as a skunk and get those bad guys to drive away. Libyans, they don't want to go around here
fly away. Gets a cape.
with a cape.
How about my favorite in consideration for Doc Brown, Danny DeVito?
Whoa, that would be totally all. I mean, I would want to see that just because it would be all over the place. But I don't think it
Now
would.
keep in mind keep in mind this is like Taxi era Danny DeVito.
Right.
This isn't Frank Reynolds.
Right. Which
now
is crazy because
now I would pay to
Lloyd
see
was
Frank
attached.
Reynolds.
I would pay $100,000 to see that.
But not I don't mean DeVito. I mean like I would pay to see Frank Reynolds as Doc Brown.
Right.
What do you mean I'm gonna send you back in time? Your mother tried to bang you?
That's
Is she
basically
hot?
Rick.
Yeah, but Rick is too cynical.
I know.
Danny DeVito or Frank Reynolds is just
Right.
psychotic.
And that could be very interesting.
Mm-hmm. But you were gonna say Chris Lloyd in Taxi.
Yeah. Was also in Taxi, so as Reverend Jim was hilarious.
Yes.
So what do you do when you see a yellow light? Slow down. What do you do when you see a yellow light? Slow down. What do you do?
I'm just gonna let you keep going.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I'm stopping.
But now, how about Marty McFly? We all know the story, and we'll get to it about Eric Stoltz.
Mm-hmm.
But did you know that Charlie Sheen and Johnny Depp auditioned for Marty?
Johnny Depp completely wrong. Even though I like early Johnny Depp movies, like Edward Scissorhands and Benny and June, stuff like that, I thought he was, but he's almost too like it may. Could you imagine Johnny Depp and Jeff Goldblum together in the same movie?
My.
Charlie Sheen has too much of a mean streak. I think Michael J. Fox had a lot of like built-in credibility and lovability from his TV show Family Ties that really helped. Because you think about like a kid that certain adults or like the authority looks at as a loser, and he like skips school and he's hanging out with like this old guy, and he's like lying to his parents, wanting to get out to be with this girl that his parents don't like. You really have to have a lot of built up immunity to the audience not liking you. And it's kind of the same thing with Doc. I mean, you hear him over the phone, but you don't really get to see him until he's backing out with a car.
Until the big reveal, yeah. And he gets it with the crazy hair, and then you know what kind of character he is.
Right. And he puts Marty in harm's way, because if the car wouldn't have gone back in time, they would have been pancakes.
Now, that's an interesting thing, because have you ever heard the suicidal theory?
I have, yeah.
You don't like it?
No. Because, I mean...
Me neither. I don't think it's true, but it is kind of interesting if you think about, because he goes with his reaction and how he goes, it worked! And how he's saying, how I finally made something that worked. Paired with, all the... Do you know what this means? That this damn thing doesn't work. He's kind of had failures his entire life, and that was the last one. If it didn't work, he was done.
Yeah, because he even said that he spent like his entire family fortune. Yeah,
he stole from the Libyans. Because at that point, he didn't think that they were going to catch up to him. So the Libyans, the second he tested it and he found that it worked, that's it. I'm going to the future. I'm escaping the Libyans. I'm escaping everything. I'm just taking off. That's it. We're going to better life or whatever, right?
It's like he was going to go somewhere where he couldn't hurt anybody.
Yeah. Of course, they shot 5 weeks of footage with Eric Stoltz.
Yeah.
Before firing him and replacing him with Michael J. Fox.
And apparently, there are still some scenes in the movie where he is like either
Yes,
standing off camera or like one of the punches was like his
there
fist or
are.
something.
There are a lot of they did a lot of reshoots, but a lot of the film, well, some of the shots they just kept anyway, and obviously maybe some shots that he's not in. So some of the stuff in the big chase with the car driving away and all that, they didn't have to reshoot that again. They just shot the interior with Marty driving the car with see, I call him Marty because he's so ingrained in my head with Fox driving the car, but some of the exterior shots of the car they don't need to replace, so whatever's going on
Yeah,
there.
that makes
So it's not
sense.
like they had to reshoot everything once they recast him. But yeah, it would be really interesting to see if there's any actual shots of like Marty from behind that's Stoltz. But there isn't because his costume's different too.
Yeah, I mean, it would just have to be like the edge of his hair or something
Yeah.
because they both have brown hair.
Yeah. And Fox actually, because the shoot went on for so long, he had commitments to Family Ties and he had to shoot some of them, Family Ties and Back to the Future, like on the same day and at the same time, which is very interesting, having to juggle back and forth between some of that stuff. It'd be very exhausting, would it not?
Oh yeah,
It'd
I
be
mean,
like
because
20-hour days.
some of those, yeah, you're literally like looking at just having a few hours of sleep and
Yeah.
having to learn your lines and everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was quite the commitment.
So we talked extensively about our two leads, but again, back to the supporting casts. Crispin Glover as
Fantastic,
George McFly is great, and it
and
makes me
I like
sad that he
him
didn't
anyway.
return. I like him too,
Yeah.
but it makes me sad that he didn't come back for the sequels. And what's the story behind that one, Garrett? Do you know it off by heart, or I don't?
I think some of it was the script was going to focus on his characters some, and so he wanted a bump in pay.
Right.
And I also know that he was upset with the way the first film ended because he felt like it was promoting materialism and that it was saying that the only way people could be happy is if they had new expensive things.
Right.
So it was kind of a combination of he didn't feel like he was getting enough money and he didn't really like what they were saying with the film. So he decided not to partake.
Which is kind of hard to notice in the sequel sometimes.
Right. I mean, obviously they had to cut him out being a major character.
Yes.
But then they had a guy with a plastic face that looked just like him.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then they didn't really mention
And
it to
then-
anybody that it wasn't him.
And of course, they got sued for that.
Yeah. And now there is an actual like
Almost law.
legal precedent. Yeah.
Yeah. You
You know,
can't
saying
do
you
that.
couldn't do that.
It's interesting. He's actually 3 years younger than Michael J. Fox.
Yeah. And he looks the same now.
I know.
He's got a weird face, but
Yes. Have you watched? Did you watch American Gods?
yes.
You saw him as
He-
Mr. World.
Yeah, he's good in that. Bartleby, he's really good in, which is like a
Mhm.
play. He was in the Charlie's Angels movies as the Thin Man.
Right. He was in the Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland.
Uh,
He was like, but he was in a big outfit or something. There's some interesting
Yeah.
behind the scenes shots of him like on stilts in a mocap outfit.
I mean, that's
To get
it.
that
You don't need to change anything about him. He's already interesting enough. He's kind of like the American version of Tommy Wiseau
That's very true.
because he's a very different guy, which I think comes across great in the film.
Well, I mean,
And that's the thing, is to be able to pull that off as being something a character would do, and you not to think
Yeah.
that's, you know.
Yeah.
Well, he was in a David Lynch movie too,
Which one was that?
Wild at Heart.
Wow.
It wasn't a big character, but
Yeah.
he definitely seems like a David Lynch kind of guy.
Yes, he does. He really does. But of course, he sort of gets his turn, right? And the whole punch out scene. Well, there's so much we could talk about every character at length, but I don't want this to be a 5-hour podcast.
Right.
Unfortunate. Well, we'll talk a little more about George though. And then maybe Biff. But like when George becomes confident at the end, he also pulls that off too. Clever.
Yeah.
Now Biff.
What about a character arc? Isn't that awesome?
Mm-hmm.
How many movies does that happen in anymore?
Yeah, not a lot. But speaking of character arcs, obviously Biff Tannen,
Yes.
and he goes from being an asshole, drunk, like abusive. I spilt beer all over my nice shirt, McFly.
Yeah. Oh, what a great joke
Yeah, I
to
know.
show that he was drunk driving, but
Yeah.
then to turn it on to the poor schmutz that
Yeah.
like his car got wrecked and everything, and now he's gonna have to pay for everything. Oh, and by the way, you're also gonna do my work.
Yeah. But then, of course, at the end, he turns into a bitch.
Yeah, as
And I
all
love-
alpha bullies are.
Yeah, and I love bitch Biff at the end. It cracks me up. So like with that, oh yeah, Mr. McFly, I'm just finishing up the second coat now.
Oh, hi, Marty.
And then yeah, when he runs in with the boxes, he's oh hi Marty, and oh Mr. McFly, your book's here. It's completely different. And again, Thomas Wilson nails Biff in every aspect, in that form, in the asshole form, in the Western form in number 3, in the Donald Trump form in number 2.
Yep.
It's awesome. It really is. Every character.
So
is played to
either they
perfection.
got completely, they either got completely lucky, or they have like the greatest casting director of all time.
Yeah, maybe a bit of both.
Oh, okay. It's the same casting department that did Aliens and Blade Runner.
There you go. 2 other movies that are very well cast.
An American Tail, Flight of the Navigator, Short Circuit, Return to Oz, The Goonies.
Oh, The Goonies. It's a good one.
Temple of Doom.
Oh, The Temple of Doom.
A Christmas Story.
Yeah, they just know it.
Porky, Superman.
They know how to cast.
Apparently they know what they're doing. Poltergeist, E.T., History of the World Part 1, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
So we have one of the greatest. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's like they probably won so many awards.
Yeah, I know.
So there we go. That was Jane Feinberg.
Good on you.
And we didn't mention this, but the cinematography done by Dean Cundy. For especially for a low budget film, it doesn't feel like a low budget. You have to actually think about, oh yeah, there wasn't like a big set piece, or they didn't like destroy vehicles or do anything. They made the most out of what they had, because it was only like a $18 million budget.
Yeah, something like that.
And that's not. I mean, I know it's 1985, but that's not huge.
No, like the biggest set piece is the dance at the end,
right?
Which is obviously a fantastic scene as well.
Or maybe however many DeLoreans broke down. Probably.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean you can hardly or barely get a DeLorean up to 88? What do you think of the dance scene with Marvin Berry? It's me.
Oh, it's
your cousin Marvin.
It's great.
Marvin Berry.
I mean, there's so many things happening. You don't have the chance to get bored. It's like the movie is self-aware. The editors know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have to have. I mean, and if you look at some of the like deleted scenes, they push certain boundaries of like how far you'll be interested in a scene, and then they cut those parts out.
Yeah. So
that you never get that way. So it's like, what's his name? Shit.
Who's that?
George. George is like looking at his watch and then like realizes what time it is in the film at the dance, and then we see him go out to the car because he realizes he's late. But in the original part of the film, he does that. Then he goes to like a little phone box and calls up like the national thing to ask what time it is, and then he gets stuck in the phone box because one of the guys from the dance saw him come out.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like there's all this extra stuff, and it kind of drags the pacing down, because you're like, at that point that Marty's in the back of the car and that Biff is with the mom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're kind of like on the edge of your seat, and you start to kind of lose interest, and George kind of really seems like a schmuck, whereas like this is the turning point to where it's the part where his character is going to start to learn.
Right.
And it's going to start to go the right way. So it's like it's too much of the Chevy Chase fumbling over himself and a comedy of errors. So instead of having more of that, they just cut right to his confrontation with Biff. And like, to me, that works way better than having that other part in there. And there's many other parts in the movie like that where they shave scenes because it works better.
Well, and there's that really good setup and misdirection as well. So Marty's supposed to get stopped by George, and
Right.
they show George going to do something, and then we cut to Marty, and there's a knock on the window, and it's there's George to save the day, and of course the door opens and it's Biff.
Mhm.
Dun dun dun. And I love you talked about the cinematography. I love all of the shots where the camera grows with Biff.
Yes.
When he stands up and the camera tracks him upward, it makes him feel massive, especially in comparison to Marty.
Right.
And of course, the whole fight scene between Biff and George is great. He clocks him.
Yeah, he decides to use his other hand.
Mhm.
As I think there's so many interesting things because it's like George is using his left hand to like hold his little notepad open when he's trying to talk to Lorraine about being her density.
Yeah.
And it's like they go ahead and they kind of have maybe that's not like his writing hand or whatever, but they kind of have like when he uses his left hand, he's trying to be more bold. He's trying to be different than what he was before.
Right.
It's like they're subliminally showing his character is changing slowly.
That's interesting.
And I love little things like that.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, little things like that, eh? It's great.
It's what separates just a regular movie that you'll watch and enjoy and forget about, and one that you'll keep going back to decades and decades later.
Now we want to talk about some behind the scenes stuff because this is going to be running a little long now. But man, I could just talk about this movie all day, and I don't want this to be a 5-hour podcast. But I was about to ask you, do you have any other scenes or things you want to talk about from the movie itself? But I was like, hold on, I have like 40 more.
I can talk about anything you bring up.
I know. Well, that's the thing is, again, we don't want this to be that long of a podcast. Somebody's got to edit this too. You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
Maybe we'll have to do Back to the Future Part 2. I mean, Back to the Future #1, Part 2, the podcast.
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future. But one last thing I want to talk about before we do move on to some behind the scenes stuff is the ending. We'll talk about. I mean the ending before he returns, I guess. And the clock tower sequence. I don't mean we already talked about the actual ending with bitch Biff and all that.
Right.
But like the Johnny Be Good scene is like we don't really need to talk about how fantastic that is and how fun it is and great it is.
Well, the other thing too, when we talk about the second film, we can go into all of that because they revisit.
That's true. The one thing that is in this one is the almost the climax, or at least the Shakespearean kind of climax of the film, comes when George and Lorraine do kiss, because that's the turning point. That's where everything is okay again. But it's shown with Marty's like jolting back to life because he's like passing out and fading into oblivion. But when they kiss, he whips back into frame and is playing the guitar perfectly again. And it's such a great way to show like it's all okay.
Yeah, the way they build up to that, the way the music is, because there's like the score is kind of like sitting there underneath.
Mm-hmm. But
so it's
following
like
Earth Angel as well. It's in the same keys and it's moving in and out with each, but it's getting more minor and it's dying and all that.
Yeah, people always talk about Inception and Hans Zimmer or even Dunkirk, and about how like, well, when it's on this part or in this level of the dream, he slows it down and does all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that was already done in Back to the Future in '85.
Yeah, that is true. And then there's of course, when he leaves and he sees his parents back then for the last time, and Lorraine goes, Marty, that's such a nice name for a third child.
Right.
That's great stuff. It's great stuff. And then the clock tower sequence is exceptional.
Do you think that George questioned why Michael J. Fox looked just like Michael J. Fox?
I don't know.
Had questions for Lorraine? You think he would have remembered what
That's
her
true.
almost boyfriend looked like?
That's true. And you named it after him.
Now, Lorraine...
Naming him after was one enough.
Me.
But did you have to buy him the same clothes? Don't you con me. Now, Lorraine.
So, do you think then that that maybe George kind of secretly knew?
Easily.
Yeah, and that's why his book came out at that specific time.
I actually 100% believe that. George is a smart guy.
Okay. Yeah.
And especially once Star Wars came out, and George definitely saw that in theaters, and Star Trek came out, and George definitely watched that. Darth Vader and Planet Vulcan, and once Van Halen comes out and Marty's blasting it, he pieced it all together.
Star Trek would have came out first.
I know. I'm not a pleb.
You didn't notice it, but your brain did. Sorry.
But still, you know what I mean? He would have pieced it all together.
Yes. Yes, I am with you 100%.
Which makes me wonder why he didn't ask Marty for any adventures. Part 4.
How do you know him and Doc didn't talk
Part
about
4. Crispin Glover and Michael J. Fox. As they are right now.
it? Oh, that would be sad.
Weird and Parkinson's. One for each of them.
They're going back in time to cure the disease.
They're just going back in time and saying, don't take the movie, don't work in the warehouse. Well, I guess we'll move on to a couple of behind the scenes fun little tidbits that you have. Some fun factaroonies, like the studio tried to get Spielberg to change the name of Back to the Future to Spaceman from Pluto.
Can you imagine that?
That should answer it. But the letter, let me see, I'm flipping through my book to try to find it. There it is. The letter is, he believes that the present draft is very, very good, except he would like to change it. He said, I think the script and hopefully the film deserves a better title. And this is from, I'm not sure, I guess the office of, it's from Sid Sheinberg, who I'm guessing is a producer or the studio.
Huh.
So he goes, now that I have buttered you up, I would suggest we consider the title Spaceman from Pluto. And then you have to change a couple things in the script, right? Modify the dialogue so that Sherman calls Marty a spaceman from Pluto at the farm, because that's not on the nose. Modify Marty's dialogue.
They're in some sort of a suicide.
Yeah, I know. Modify Marty's dialogue when he appears to George, so that he identifies himself as a spaceman from Pluto instead of Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan.
And then he winks to the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Change the title from the book written by George. From a match made in space to Spaceman from Pluto. And then he goes, obviously you get the idea.
Yeah, you're a moron.
Yeah. And then have you heard Spielberg's reply? They sent a letter back where he goes, thank you for the very humorous and thoughtful joke letter. We're all still busting up laughing about it.
Nice.
It's like,
that's hilarious.
Such a subtle fuck you. It's great. It's great. And good on Spielberg. You know, he has the artistic integrity to keep something like that intact. And this movie would have been forgotten, I think, if it was Spaceman from Pluto. Well, maybe not.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, you never know when changing some small things would make something crash.
Could change the entire course. They could be living like all like the kings, like the family at the end of Back to the Future, all because they changed the title.
I mean, but the other thing is, I mean, Indiana Jones fits, but it was Indiana Smith.
Yeah, that would be dumb though.
It doesn't sound as iconic. Right.
Indiana Smith. Studios suck, maybe. That's why.
but this was a script that was rejected by every major studio.
Yeah. It was also a script that went through plenty of rewrites to make it much, much better. Some of the early drafts are not good. So
that was probably a blessing in disguise that they had the ability to work on it so many times.
Absolutely.
And thankfully, Zemeckis and Gale owned the rights to the film and the sequels.
Yes.
So as long as they are alive, it will never be rebooted.
Thank God. Although I would be okay with a number 4. I could be persuaded. Doc and Marty one last ride. Actually, Telltale Games made a game, a Back to the Future game.
Yeah, that's basically the fourth one.
And it is the fourth one. It's fantastic. It's not in their current style, like the Walking Dead games or anything. It's like their old point and click kind of styles. But like Chris Lloyd is in it, in the remastered or like rebooted version for the new consoles and such. Michael J. Fox shows up in it too.
Right. Yeah, I've played it.
It's great.
Believe it or not.
It's awesome.
I liked it.
It's a lot of fun. And it really is like number 4. It feels like number 4. And of course, there's the animated series, which is also actually pretty good. Have you ever watched that?
It's been a while since I've seen it.
It's not bad. It's fun, more stuff. It's not Michael J. Fox. It might be Chris Lloyd, but you know, it's there's a lot of stuff, and I'm glad it'll never be remade.
Right.
Another fun fact is that John DeLorean, the creator of the DeLorean, saw the film early and sent a letter saying that he loved how it immortalized his dream on film. He basically gave them the blessing, and he said, "When I saw the DeLorean, I was delighted." It was great.
Yeah, I mean it's a classic movie car. And
in the same weekend, Rambo 2 came out, and it beat that at the box office and went on to become the highest-grossing film of 1985. And of course, it spawned 2 sequels, which we might get to eventually.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. They said that when it was shown to a test audience, that ILM hadn't finished like all the special effects. and the last several minutes of the movie had to be shown in black and white because it wasn't finished
Oh, really?
yet. But it didn't matter; people still loved it.
Yeah. Now, is that the flying part?
Yeah, I mean, it was specifically the in-flight shot, but that would only have been a couple seconds. But apparently, I guess they said the last several
Maybe it was the
minutes
last several minutes of things with special effects. So the whole ending sequence
Yeah.
then too, like at the
Yeah.
clock tower.
That makes sense.
Now, what do you think of that final scene? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
I mean, it's definitely a classic line.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because I want to say that I had read before that like there were specific things they didn't want to do in their time travel story. They didn't want to have a flying car. They didn't want to go to the future. And it's like every single thing they didn't want to do, they put at the end. And then when it became so popular and they were kind of like pressured into making a sequel, they had to work with all the things they didn't want to do.
But thank God they kind of worked out.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I love part 2 and 3.
Oh, I do too.
No, I think, I mean, not as much as number 1, but that's just,
Right.
you know, but they're still fantastic. And I think it's an excellent trilogy with 3 sort of distinct acts almost. And it has a lot of awesome character growth. And maybe we'll talk about that when we get to 2 and 3. I think that's going to do it.
There you go.
You think that's going to do it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can catch us down at the Digital Drive-In every week or every other week, whatever we're doing.
Way to commit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the way it is. Of course, the Digital Drive-In is always a collection and discussion on movies we love. And we'll be back next time with a change of pace and a little bit more modern of a film. We've been doing old ones up until now, 80s films. Actually, all 3 of them were. But we're jumping up into a film from only a couple of years ago, aren't we, Garrett?
I don't know. What are we doing?
We're doing Mad Max Fury Road.
Never heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not very good, so.
I heard visually it was unpleasing.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Of course, that's the 2015 action epic from George Miller. So you can catch us on all back here at the Digital Drive-In next time. We'll see you around.
See ya.